to explain to everyone why we're having this demo today. Also, I'd like to take you through who Insentra are. There's a number of people on this call today that are either partners or our partners' end users. So a number of you already have worked with Insentra before, but I thought I would take you through that journey at the same time. So over the last month, we've been making some calls to some of our strategic partners as we're doing a lot of work with transitioning to the cloud with Office 365. And as you all know, end user experience is critical today. And for a long period of time, there's always been a challenge with running Office 365 in a virtualized environment like XenApp. And as soon as we start scaling those environments, we have degradation in performance from an end user perspective. So we decided to discuss these challenges with some of our strategic partners, and it was an overarching there were overarching comments from everyone that, number one, they hadn't really experienced this before, but they also hadn't really scaled the environments that they would have some of these challenges. All the partners that we did speak to were very interested in hearing about our service today using FSLogix. So we decided that we'd bring this all together and run a couple of webinars and actually give you a technical demonstration to show you what's actually happening under the bonnet. So before we go any further, I thought it would be a really good idea to explain to you who Insentra is and why we're there today. So we are a 100% channel-focused organization that only deal with services through the channel. So one thing that's important is that we don't sell any products that would be competing with our channel today. We work directly through the channel, and we do not transact directly with end customers. We have a number of practices here today that complement our partners, namely our migrations practice, our Microsoft Cloud and Collaboration practice, our Citrix practice, as well as our overarching managed services practice that has the capability to support all those different vendors. So before we continue, I'd like to introduce Aaron Parker to everyone. A lot of you would have already heard of Aaron and worked with Aaron in the past. Aaron's one of the only Citrix CTPs here in Australia and is very well renowned globally. And Aaron will be taking you through not only our journey with FSLogix, but also how we can help you with your clients and your environments improve that end user experience. Aaron, over to you.
Thanks, Gary. So yeah, it's probably worth maybe just a quick little piece on who FSLogix is. Why are we here actually talking about FSLogix? FSLogix are a bunch of guys and gals with some long experience in the desktop and application space and things like VDI and server-based computing and so on. And they have put together a number of solutions that revolve around delivery of applications in virtual and physical desktop environments, as well as tackling user profile challenges and, of course, the subject of this webinar, the Office 365 piece. So they have a number of different components. Today I'm going to touch on the Office 365, or generally talk about the Office 365 component, but I will also touch around the profile piece, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview as well. So why are we here talking about FSLogix for Office 365, and I'll talk through the particular user experience challenges, especially when it comes to components of Office 365 that the user sees, and that's primarily Outlook, and maybe you're also, or your customers are also using OneDrive for Business. How do we enable these features in a virtual desktop environment, whether that be VDI or whether it be server-based computing with XenApp, and how do we give the user that local-like experience that they expect? When we move a user from a physical desktop into a virtual desktop, or if we're kicking off a large virtual desktop project, one of the key pieces we want to be able to do is to make that project successful is concentrate on end user experience, concentrate on making the users happy, making sure that when they move them into that desktop and that virtual or remote desktop environment, that their applications continue to work the way that they expect, because everyone's familiar with the way these applications work on a physical desktop. So the challenge is when we move these users to a physical desktop, a virtual desktop, we might have to do things like with Outlook is change the way that it operates. So on a physical desktop PC, when we enable Outlook, we enable things like cache mode. The user has Windows search available to them, so that the Outlook is responsive. They can search inside their mailbox, and their data is immediately at their fingertips. The other one is with OneDrive for Business as well. This is a really difficult piece to actually make work under a non-persistent desktop environment like you might have with XenApp or a non-persistent VDI environment. So I've talked briefly about the user experience, and this, as I said, with making a video project successful, I think this is always going to be key. If the user, to keep the user satisfied, make sure that they're productive, get up and running quickly, make sure they're happy with that environment that we're delivering to them, then the user experience is always going to be key, and that's going to be made up of a number of different things. It's not necessarily just the applications. There might be a few other bits and pieces as well. But from an end user perspective, if they are used to seeing an application work in a certain way, when they move into a virtual desktop environment, they shouldn't have to adjust the way that they work, because from an IT perspective, we've had to make changes to that application, and that application now doesn't work the same way that they want. So the user needs and wants an experience that is just like a local PC. Hopefully, maybe even better. Maybe it's quicker than what they had on their physical PC. And it's also responsive. If they're using their application, they expect it to work a particular way. If they're moving something like Outlook, for example, they're moving around their mailbox, they're doing search, they need search results there instantly. They need their mailbox to respond exactly the way they expect. And with Outlook in particular, if I'm having to turn it on, put Outlook in online mode, and under XenApp and so on, I don't get Windows search, that goes immediately against what the user expects. It changes that user experience. Really interesting example of, I think, of user experience and improving that user experience in remote desktop environments is with GPUs. Consider Windows operating systems, since maybe even Windows Vista actually, but modern operating versions of Windows, Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016, they leverage GPUs like Windows has actually never done previous. And also with the applications, consider Microsoft Office, modern browsers that HTML5 supported browsers. These are all leveraging GPUs, and if a user has a physical PC, they have a GPU that's dedicated to that user, so when they log on to the desktop is nice and responsive. It responds in a nice way. You get nice animations. Applications in the browser are nice and responsive because it's able to leverage that local GPU. So there's been a lot of interest in the past few years with GPU acceleration in remote desktop environments, not just for specialized cases, but for just the general office worker, and it's all about improving that end user experience, giving them that local like PC experience and making them productive, making sure that desktop looks and feels just like it does on a physical PC. So with that in mind, this is what we're doing in regards to Office 365. So if maybe you're a customer moving to Office 365, or you're a partner that manages a customer environment and working with a customer to migrate them to Office 365, and they have Citrix Zen Desktop, XenApp, VMware, Horizon, or even just plain Microsoft RDS. One of the things that we'll do with Outlook is we'll put it into online mode, because having cache mode means that we have to go and put an OST file up on a network. we might not be able to enable Windows search, because if we're in a non-persistent environment, we don't know which machine that user is going to log on to. So Windows search is just turned off, and like we've done for many, many years, if we're optimizing a XenApp environment, we won't turn Windows search off just because that's the thing that we've always done. And just the nature of that environment forces us to do it. The other one is OneDrive for Business. So consider the OneDrive for Business client. They've got the next-gen client now. It installs in the user profile, and it works by synchronizing a copy of their documents down into their profile. In a non-persistent environment, the user would have to recache those files every time they log on, meaning that every time they log on, all those files have got to sync back down again. That might take time, and it's going to impact the end user experience. So we have three things that we're trying to solve. Outlook, making it performant and responsive. So the way we would do that is enable cache mode. One of the ways around that might be to put the OST file up on the network. Now, Outlook cache mode is supported under remote desktop services, has been since Outlook 2010, but actually putting an OST file or a PST file up on the network is not actually supported. So where do you go and put that? The other problem with that, putting an OST file on the network, is that it's not scalable. So write operations take longer. Users might experience timeouts. Outlook might have pauses and so on. You might have file server sizing considerations that you haven't considered, or have OST file corruptions. Then the second piece is search. How do we enable search in a non-persistent environment? And it's not something we can do out of the box. Users want that search, so when they're looking for search terms in their mailbox, so that they get that response quickly. Particularly if, say, I'm a law firm, solicitors or accountants, they typically tend to use their mailbox as their entire file system, so they need those search results very quickly. And then the third one is OneDrive for Business. So workarounds include perhaps forcing the user to access everything through the browser or through the Office applications. Maybe mapping a network drive via WebDAV to the OneDrive for Business folder, but that presents two challenges. One, the user experience isn't so great because users are used to accessing those files inside the file system. And two, performance. It's not very quick to have to be forced to access those documents through the browser every time, or even directly through the application. So that's a problem. We change the user experience, and the way we're going to get around this is using FSLogix Office 365 containers. So I'm going to walk through a bit of a demo right now to give you a bit of an idea under the hood how this actually fits together, and give you a bit of an idea of the user experience. While I'm doing this, if there's any questions, you should be able to type those into the chat box. So just in the GoToWebinar control panel, if you have any questions, just let them through, and I should be able to answer them as we go through. So I'm just going to flip over to a desktop here. Okay, so what I have here in my demo environment is I have XenApp. I've got XenApp 7.13 delivering a Windows Server 2016 desktop, which to the end user just looks like Windows 10, but as you can see, it's Windows Server, so pretty straightforward kind of stuff. What I have inside here, though, is I have the FSLogix agent. Now, what I've done is I've installed the agent inside my master image. The great thing about the FSLogix approach here is that there's only really two components that we need. One is the agent. The agent goes into the master image, and the agent does the magic, of course, and configuration via group policy. Other than that, that's all we do with FSLogix. So what this means is essentially we have no architecture that we need to add to your existing environment. So we utilize existing storage, we utilize existing management approach with group policy, and we have one agent. And in the case of FSLogix, although we have for components, we essentially have one agent to rule them all, which is really great. So we're not having to install and configure multiple agents. So what I have here inside this desktop, I've logged on as a standard user, and I have all my applications available to me. And inside that, I then have the Office 365 container mapped into my environment. And essentially all that is a virtual disk that sits on a network share somewhere. So this is exactly the same approach as I might take as if I was running virtual machines on top of Hyper-V. So with those virtual machines, I'll put them on an SMB location using perhaps something like Windows Scale-Out File Server to provide high availability and performance for those virtual machines. I can take exactly the same approach to FSLogix Office 365 containers, because under the hood, these are just virtual disks. If I was to open up the virtual disk and have a look inside it, I would see the Outlook OST file. In this particular one, I would see the profile and so on, so it's pretty straightforward. Those disks are mapped to my session, or mapped to the machine that I've logged onto, and then redirected inside my session. So really what's happening is that my profile and the areas that Outlook and OneDrive write to have been redirected into this virtual disk. The FSLogix agent does its stuff to optimize that and get it across into the virtual disk that's actually sitting across the network. So now if I was to log off, log back on again, my profile will be instantly available to me. My OneDrive for Business folder will follow, and my Outlook OST file will follow as well. So if I go and open up Outlook, inside this image I have Office 365 Pro Plus installed, I have Windows Search enabled, and I have Outlook enabled in cache mode. Now I can choose to how much of my mailbox I want to set to be available offline. I've got a pretty small mailbox here, so I'm enabling all of my mailbox, but I could go and change that, just like I'm doing on a physical PC. And as you can see, the data file, my OST file, is in my local, the default location looks like the local disk. So from an application perspective, it is no different. The application knows no better. You just enable cache mode, put it in the default location, which under the hood is actually redirected across the network into a virtual disk. So now when I go and search for items, of course, I can type my wording correctly, then I can get instant search results as well. So pretty straightforward. Outlook cache mode is enabled, and Windows Search is enabled. Both of them roam with me as I log on to a new machine. And then pretty much the same thing for OneDrive. I have OneDrive in my profile and enable. I'm synchronizing OneDrive. So in effect, what I should be able to do now is sign out. I could potentially log on to a different desktop. I could even, if I wanted to, I could perhaps log on from a Windows Server 2016 desktop or a Windows 10 desktop if I needed to. I can log back on. Now two things are happening here. I'm using FSLogix profile containers, and I'm using FSLogix Office 365 containers. So I log back on, my profile is instantly available to me because it's not having to actually roam. It's just instantly attached to the machine that I'm logging onto. And the same with the Office 365 container. So again, my my OneDrive for Business sync folder is available there immediately. I can open up Outlook, and my mailbox is there immediately as well. Nice and easy. So really all I've done to implement this, as I've said, I've put the agent in my master image. I've deployed the configuration through group policy, and I've told the agent, you go and store the containers in a network location that is over there. And that network location might be Windows File Server, might be something like Windows Scale-Out File Server. It might be something provided by NetApp, for example. It could be the SMB or Windows file services provided by the actual underlying storage layer. The beauty of that approach is that you can rely on your existing storage layer to do things like dedupe and compression, and perhaps scaling the disk as on demand, depending on performance requirements and so on. I can log on and off between machines. Things like my profile and my Outlook are there. My Outlook data file are there instantly, and I get the look and feel that as a user that I see on a physical machine. It just closes that last mile between a virtual desktop and a remote desktop. So with that, I think the demo is actually pretty straightforward. There's not too much to it, and I think that's part of the beauty of the FSLogix approach, is the simplicity. I can actually be up and running with this in very little amount of time, I think. So in terms of doing an evaluation, for example, we can provide you with the binaries, and I can work with you to actually get that up and running for an evaluation in your own environment. So with the demo out of the way, what I wanted to do is just open that up for a Q&A. So Gary, I might pass back to you.
Thanks, Aaron. So we've had a few questions already being asked. If you've got any more, keep them coming, but I've got a few that we can start with. So a number of partners are saying that they've had these challenges, but a solution would be to add more bandwidth.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I have seen this one previously as well. So consider what we're doing with enabling Office 365. Typically, the process is I'm migrating from an on-premises Exchange environment and I'm moving my mailbox over to Microsoft. So I'm increasing the distance between where my desktop is and where the user's mailbox is. So immediately, one of the things I want to do, especially on a physical desktop, will enable cache mode, and it sort of hides the any network challenges between the client and the mailbox. One of the approaches could be, yes, throw more bandwidth at it. However, you're always going to be limited by the rules, the laws of physics. There's only so much that I can do to actually reduce latency, and latency is always going to be a killer, even within a data center. One of those things, one of the benefits of enabling cache mode, even if my mailbox was sitting in the next rack, is that I'm still improving that end user experience because I've got cache mode and I'm enabling Windows search. I get that local like PC experience. So it's not necessarily solved by just throwing more bandwidth at it.
Another question I have, how does licensing work?
If I consider a customer or a partner moving a customer to Office 365, Office 365 is a per-user subscription model. And FSLogix aligned the Office 365 container licensing with that model as well. So FSLogix Office 365 containers is a per-user per annum subscription license. So that comes with 9x5 support, or you can I think you can actually purchase a subscription with 24/7 support if you need to. I've touched very briefly on the other components. There are other pieces inside the FSLogix suite, and you can purchase. There may be reasons why you may want to purchase more than one. So you might purchase profile containers. You may purchase Java version control. If you start talking a number of these components, it may be simpler to actually license the entire suite. And that way then too we can license on a concurrent basis, and we can do perpetual model licensing as well depending on the customer requirements. Often it requires a bit of a deeper understanding of the end user environment, or if you are a DAS provider, for example, it helps to actually, for me, to have that conversation with you, having a better understanding of your requirements so that we can talk about licensing in more detail.
Another question that's been asked, what are the storage requirements and what's the impact on storage?
So yeah, I've talked a bit about storage already. I think, as I said there, is that the FSLogix doesn't introduce any architectural changes. So the storage that you have, you'll be able to continue to leverage. Now underneath that, you might do things like reducing the amount of mailbox that is cached to reduce the amount of capacity. If I need to cache 100% of all of my users' mailboxes, then that's going to be quite a lot of storage capacity. But there are custom environments that demand that, and I used I use solicitors and accountants as good examples of that. Most cases, I think users can probably get away with, say, 3 months worth of their mailbox, so we're caching less data. Because, especially with the Office 365 container piece, it's just the OST cache file, and maybe it's your OneDrive for Business. You don't necessarily need to be putting that on Tier 1 storage. However, if your underlying storage layer perhaps has a hybrid storage solution or provides auto-tiering features, then you could potentially either offload everything to, say, Tier 2 storage, or have the auto-tiering push it down to Tier 2 as needed.
All right, another couple of questions. How does it compare to Uni Desk?
Yeah, and I see there's kind of a similar question there around UPM and UEM type stuff as well. So maybe I can talk about these two in the same response. One of the best things that Citrix has done in a long time is purchase Uni Desk. This is really exciting. Actually, having a Uni Desk, the potential that Uni Desk is going to offer is really awesome. Uni Desk does not offer a user-writable layer, I guess, at this stage. And even perhaps when they do in the future, they're not going to be able to enable all of the advanced features that FSLogix does. Now, that's just for, say, FSLogix Office 365 containers and FSLogix profile containers. You could use them in conjunction with Uni Desk. The other one, though, is actually Uni Desk as an application delivery mechanism. So with Uni Desk, I can deliver my applications as layers. And one of the things I may do is inside that layer, I may install multiple applications, and I can effectively actually leverage FSLogix application masking to hide and show those applications depending on who the user is inside a layer. So I can use it to actually simplify my Uni Desk layers as well. So just touching back on the profile piece, Gary, because there's a question here from Ralph about migration options. Yeah, so yep.
Ralph's asking, with regards to migration options, going from your typical roaming UPM or UEM to FSLogix solution, how would you slot this into an existing VDI solution?
Okay, so I might just answer another piece for that first. So around the Citrix profile containers, I think the beauty of it is that I can be up and running within 5 to 10 minutes, whereas if I go and look like something like Citrix UPM, especially on Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016, I have a pretty complex configuration that I need to do to be able to have include folders and exclude folders, and then when I'm also considering universal applications or user-installed applications, and that becomes a pretty complex configuration. With the Citrix profile containers, it's just something I can turn on, I capture the entirety of the user profile, fire and forget, and I'm done. So that's great for greenfield environments, but if I am an existing environment, I want to migrate from roaming profiles or UPM or something else, I guess. There's a couple of ways that we can do that. Because a profile containers piece essentially just captures the entirety of the user profile, I can potentially turn them both on at the same time as for a migration period, and then turn off UPM or something like that. The other way is that we may want to actually, rather than do that during user logon, we may want to actually pre-create the profile containers and populate those out of existing profiles that sit on a share somewhere. So FSLogix provides a migration tool that enables us to do that.
What type of hypervisors or virtual solutions does FSLogix work on?
I didn't even talk about this at all. So FSLogix is agnostic to the underlying hypervisor because it's just an agent that sits inside the image. So that means it works on Hyper-V, XenServer, vSphere, AHV, Red Hat, anything like that. It also means that it works on Azure and AWS or any sort of semi-private cloud, whatever it might be, Oracle Cloud, doesn't matter. Because it's inside Windows, it doesn't matter what the underlying hypervisor is.
All right, we'll just give everyone a few more seconds to ask another questions. We've had a question around some rough pricing.
Yep.
Are we able to elaborate on some estimates of what an end user would pay per user per year?
Should I bat that one back to you?
You probably can. So what we're going to say, I just read out that question, what we're going to say on that one is really our take home for today. We would love to hear from you. We would like to discuss these solutions and how we can help you be more effective with FSLogix. So we will be sending out an email where we would like to do a free evaluation so we can actually show you how well this product does work and how it's going to improve your end user experience. If you don't receive that email from us, please send us an email to fslogix@insentragroup.com.au and we'll touch base with you shortly. Unless there's any other questions, once again, I'd like to thank everyone that's made the time to come on this call today. Thanks, Aaron, for taking your time as well.
There's just one last one again from Ralph. So just on that licensing thing, I think it's fair to say, as you said at the beginning of the webinar, because we Insentra, we don't sell directly to end users. That discussion around pricing we need to have with the partner. So we have partner licensing that we can share. And then Ralph's question is, the licensing is user-based. So if one user logs on to multiple desktops, there's one license, yes. So Office 365 Containers by itself is a per user per annum subscription model. There are other ways. If you're looking at the other components, you can purchase a concurrent model and even perpetual model licensing if you need to. So we need to have that discussion.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Aaron. All right, everybody. We said we'd get you out here quickly, on time, even a little bit more time in your day. So thanks once again. Thanks for joining us. And hopefully we'll speak to you all soon. Have a wonderful day.